Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. So-called Doomsday Cult duo Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell are charged with the murder of her 2 children and his late wife. Why it took nearly a year and a half for the charges to be filed and the couple's court appearances.
This investigation is far from over.
An Iowa farm worker accused of murdering a college student takes the stand in his own defense. Cristhian Bahena Rivera tells a jury through an interpreter 2 men forced him into hiding Mollie Tibbetts' body in a cornfield.
The bigger one, I could see that he had a gun, and the smaller one, I could see that he had a knife.
Plus, fiery courtroom moments as the trial continues for real estate heir Robert Durst in the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman.
It's a dead end into a crashing wall.
Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. The so-called Doomsday Cult couple, Lori Vallow and her husband Chad Daybell, are now facing murder charges for the deaths of her 2 children and his late wife.
For a year and a half to bring justice to Tammy Daybell, Tylee Ryan, and J.J. Vallow.
Idaho prosecutors announced the indictment of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. The couple is charged with the murders of 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, and Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell. The announcement comes on what would have been J.J.'s birthday.
The thousands of hours that have been invested into seeking the truth for these innocent victims must be recognized.
The couple wed in Hawaii 2 weeks after Tammy's death, and while the children were reported missing. The bodies of the children were later discovered buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. Officials say Vallow and Daybell believe in a doctrine to rid the world of zombies and the human bodies they inhabit. Friends previously testified the couple believed the 2 children had become zombies. According to the indictment, text messages between the couple talking about Tammy Daybell being in limbo and Tammy being possessed by a spirit named Viola. The couple has been in jail since last year on charges of concealing evidence.
We know many members of the community may feel that progress on this case has been slow. Due to the ongoing safety restrictions imposed by the courts during the pandemic, we just recently were given permission to present information to the grand jury for their review.
Court records show dozens of witnesses testified over 5 days in front of a secret grand jury. Lori is now facing 11 charges, including murder, conspiracy, and grand theft for collecting Social Security for the children after their deaths. Chad is now facing 12 charges, including murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud for collecting Tammy Daybell's life insurance.
The penalty for the most serious charges range from life in prison without the possibility of parole to the death penalty. We will not be disclosing further information about what penalties we will pursue for these charges.
Terri, when it comes to the charges for the children, we've been waiting for a long time. Now you add in Tammy Daybell. What do you think took so long, and how did we get here?
You know, when you think about it, a year and a half is not that long, particularly when you have multiple defendants, you have multiple victims, you have multiple charges, and you have multiple dates, and you add the, pandemic along with that. It really wasn't that long. Listen, the indictment itself has 9 counts ranging from murder to insurance fraud. And Chad and Lori, they are named together in most of these counts, including the conspiracy for first-degree murder of J.J., Tylee, and Tammy. So I think that we will get some justice here because everyone has been involved.
Yeah, and still a lot of questions floating around. Those questions will hopefully be answered as this case progresses to an inevitable trial. The defendants appeared in court on Wednesday for their initial appearance on the murder charges.
You understand your legal rights here today?
I do.
Mr. Pryor, did you go through that notification of rights form with your client?
Yes, Your Honor, I did.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Daybell, did you receive a copy of the indictment that was filed on May 25th, 2021, a warrant that was filed on that same date?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a chance to review that with your counsel, Mr. Pryor?
He did, Judge, and we have no questions at this time.
The court took a recess prior to the hearing today and had a sidebar with counsel in chambers. Based upon the information that was provided to the court finds that there's some exigent circumstances as well as a motion that was made orally to me to continue the initial appearance by the defense to a future time. A date certain has not yet been set.
Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Nima Rahmani. Nima, as a former prosecutor, can you explain how this goes from a tampering case to a murder case like it did here in the Vallow Daybell case.
Brian, prosecutors had more than enough evidence to charge Chad and Lori with the murders of JJ and Tylee. The bodies are literally buried in the backyard. They're dismembered, they're burned, they're tied up in plastic bags, and the cell site evidence puts the couple in the backyard when the bodies were buried. Not to mention that Chad flees when he sees law enforcement digging up the backyard. So not surprising that the murder charges came forward, the first-degree and conspiracy charges with respect to JJ and Tylee. What is surprising, however, is despite all these disappearances and deaths involving this family, they charged Chad with the first-degree murder of his ex-wife, Tammy, and charged Lori with conspiracy to kill her as well.
Yeah, Terri, I know I keep beating this drum and it's surprising to me, but the children's bodies are found on Chad Daybell's property. Now we've got alleged murder charges. The only question to me is, are these charges going to pull Chad and Lori apart, or are they still going to be tried together?
You know, I think they're going to start the finger pointing. Remember, Lori has been declared indigent, and she's married to Chad. He could have assisted her as far as that's concerned. And, you know, you have to think about Alex, who also was charged with conspiracy for all three, JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. He's tied into this because he had a burner phone and he allegedly shot at Tammy. And so I think that they are all going to be pointing fingers at each other, including pointing fingers at Alex.
Yeah, especially considering, as Nina said, that one of the charges are for Tammy Vallow. Now, Lori is not charged with her murder, but only the conspiracy after the fact. So maybe she doesn't want to go down on a third murder and only wants to fight the other two. That would make sense to me. But of course, we'll see how this plays out in the courts. Thank you both. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, attorneys get heated in the Robert Durst murder trial in California. But first, defendant Cristhian Bahena Rivera takes the stand in the Mollie Tibbetts murder trial. Hear his explanation for the murder of the Iowa college student found dead in a cornfield next. We're back. The man charged with killing Mollie Tibbetts takes the stand in his own defense and says he didn't kill her, but she was in his car. Law and Crime's Angenette Levy is here with a riveting testimony.
Yeah, Brian, Cristhian Bahena Rivera, really, he took the stand in stunning fashion, telling the jury a tale about two masked men killing Mollie Tibbetts and then him leaving her in the cornfield.
With the help of two interpreters, Cristhian Bahena Rivera told the jurors his story.
Did you tell law enforcement the truth that night?
Not all.
Mollie Tibbetts was in the trunk of your car, isn't that right?
Yes.
Bahena Rivera said he drove into Brooklyn the night Mollie Tibbetts disappeared after two masked men broke into his trailer, one armed with a knife, the other with a gun. He pointed on a map where he was told to go. Then the man with a knife got out of the car while the other man stayed with him.
Did you hear him say anything?
Pues se escuchaban muchas cosas, pero lo único que se pudo escuchar fue que él dijo, come on, Jack.
You could hear a lot of things, but I guess what I heard him saying is, come on, Jack.
But Bahena Rivera said he didn't know whether the man was referring to Tibbetts' boyfriend, Dalton Jack. He said the masked men forced him to drive to a cornfield and then left him there.
Did you look in the trunk?
Sí.
Yes.
What did you see?
Un cuerpo.
A body.
Bahena said the body in the trunk was Mollie Tibbetts.
At that point in time, did it look like she was alive?
Al principio miré como algún movimiento, pero después no miré ningún tipo de movimiento.
Well, at the beginning, I saw like a little bit of movement, but then after, there was no movement.
Bahena Rivera says he covered the body with corn stalks so the sun wouldn't hit it. He says he stayed quiet for weeks because the men threatened his daughter and her mother. Then investigators came to question him.
Did you ever believe that things would be better if you told them what they wanted to hear?
Sí.
Yes.
On cross-examination, the prosecutor seized on what Bahena Rivera didn't tell investigators.
You told Officer Romero that you confronted Mollie Tibbetts on 385th. Is that correct?
Sí.
Yes.
You never mentioned two other men. Is that true?
Correcto.
Correct.
Prosecutor Scott Brown also questioned Bahena Rivera about admissions he made to Officer Romero.
You also told her, I did it, didn't I? Do you recall that?
La verdad no.
The truth, no.
You don't remember asking her that question?
No.
No.
Now, Scott Brown ended his cross-examination by asking Bahena Rivera whether or not it was true that he was the only person that could lead police to Mollie Tibbetts' body. He said that was true. The defense has rested its case. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Here again with us is criminal defense attorney Nima Rahmani and Terri Austin. Terri, after his testimony, where do you stand on Bahena Rivera's guilt or innocence?
Listen, at this point, you really have to wonder whether it is the defendant's word against what Dalton Jack said and what the story might be as far as the prosecution is concerned. So I think that most of the jury is not going to believe what Rivera is saying here, only because the story is so far-fetched. It just so happens that two strangers who were wearing masks, they appeared in his home and they told him to drive and he drove. One had a knife, one had a gun. It's just way too convenient. And then they left him and he was left with a body in his trunk. I don't think the jury's going to believe this. And I don't think that the jury is going to believe that Dalton Jack is the one who did this, because he has so many people who supported his alibi. So it's just one person's word against another.
Anyway, that definitely the jury could go that way. But let's think about the defense's arguments. Could this be coercion in a type of way where they're saying Bahena Rivera was forced to do these acts and that the murder charges are not actually on him and that the burying of the body is coercion? Could those get him off on these charges?
Brian, I agree with Terri on this one. This was an absolute outrageous lie by Rivera on the stand today. And I expect both the jury and the judge to punish him. I mean, there is no way that the story makes any sense. There is a video of him driving, stalking Mollie Tibbetts. He made admissions, which now he's actually opened the door. Admissions that were initially suppressed because of Romero's incorrect Miranda warnings, those now all come in because he's testified and perjured himself. And so previously suppressed statements are now admissible during cross-examination. We know why this case is going to trial, because the defense wanted to preserve their argument to suppress the confession. The trial judge denied that motion, but they wanted to preserve the right to appeal that issue. But now that he's come and testified in such really an outrageous way, I expect this almost all-white jury in Iowa to convict him and convict him quickly.
Angenette, your thoughts on the matter. Did this testimony help him in any way?
Yeah, I really don't think it helps him at all. If he was coerced by law enforcement, which he's arguing, he had 11 hours to come clean with this story and say, I did this under duress. And they could have protected his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend, and his daughter.
All right. We'll see how this plays out. Of course, you still got closing arguments and see how the defense wants to tie all this information together. But from the three of you, looks like there's going to be a conviction on the charges. Thank you. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, the brother of an Olympian is getting a new trial after the judge declares a mistrial. Plus, the accused Boulder store shooter makes his second court appearance. The dozens of new charges prosecutors are filing next. Welcome back. Turning to Ohio, where a mistrial has been declared for a U.S. Army soldier, Tevin Biles Thomas. According to Cleveland.com, jurors in the Biles Thomas case received legal briefs from both the defense and prosecution during deliberations. Because of the mishap, the judge declared a mistrial. The 26-year-old is accused of murdering his cousin and two other men at a 2018 New Year's Eve party. Biles Thomas claims self-defense. He's the biological brother of Olympic gold medalist Simone Biles. The pair did not grow up together. Jury selection for his new trial begins Wednesday. The accused Boulder, Colorado grocery store shooter is now facing 115 charges. Ahmad Al-Alissa appeared in court on Tuesday as prosecutors announced additional attempted murder charges and 47 crime of violence sentence enhancers. The charges are related to people in the store and people outside fleeing back in March when shots rang out. 10 people were killed, including 1 police officer. Alyssa's expected back in court in September for a hearing to review evidence in the case. All right, let's bring in criminal defense attorney Nima Rahmani to discuss more. Nima, when you hear the sheer volume of the charges against Alyssa in this case, can you tell us what the trial is going to look like and how hard is the prosecution going after him?
They have to go after him hard. You have 10 murder victims. You have 47 others who were at least in the line of fire, and they form the basis of the attempted murder charges. So this is what we call a slow guilty plea as a prosecutor, because there's really no defense here. It's obviously him, and it's just a matter of time before he's convicted. The only real defense here is mental competence, but that's going to be addressed before the trial.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is even defense attorneys would call this a very long plea allocution, so definitely agree there. Facts are very hard against him. Thank you. Now, let's check in with Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross on what he's digging into this week.
Thanks, Brian. Coming up this week on Brian Ross Investigates, a troubling story about young athletes and their coaches. We've all heard about USA Swimming and USA Gymnastics. Now the allegations of sexual abuse and cover-up involve the United States Tennis Association. In a new lawsuit, the USTA is accused of failing to tell their athletes or their parents about coaches who were sexual predators.
I was sexually abused by this coach from the time when I was about 13 to about 15 or so.
The USTA said it had no comment for our report. That's coming up this week on Brian Ross Investigates on the Law&Crime Trial Network. Brian?
Thanks, Brian. When we come back, another fiery exchange between the prosecution and defense in the Robert Durst trial. The courtroom drama you don't want to miss. Next. Welcome back. Attorneys in the Robert Durst trial are fighting over witnesses to show that the disappearance of the millionaire's first wife is tied to the murder of his best friend. The real estate heir is accused of murdering Susan Berman back in December of 2000. Berman allegedly helped Durst cover up the assumed murder of his wife Kathy in 1982. Doctors have taken the stand, saying it was unusual for Kathy to not show up for her rotations during medical school. Things got heated during cross-examination, causing the judge to ask the jury to leave. Then, attorneys made their arguments.
So what happened, Your Honor, is the witness was critiqued by Mr. DeGuerin for having not been shown certain documents and being aware of the history of those documents. So I said to Mr. DeGuerin, I want to speak to the witness, but I want you to be there so you can hear exactly what I say.
I'm nodding my head because obviously that would be the ethical way to do such a thing.
And that's what I did. As I started to walk back there, Mr. Chesnoff starts screaming that not to go back there, that it's improper for me to do this. I told him it's not improper. And again, the reason that I was doing it, Your Honor, is that what is going on is that the witness is being asked about a situation with Dr. Cook, Dr. Wilk, the surgery rotation, etc., when he has no knowledge. And when Mr. DeGuerin specifically asked him, isn't it true Mr. Lewin never showed you any of those documents?
Defense attorneys accuse the prosecutor of coaching a witness, a claim the prosecution doesn't take lightly.
I don't think it's an unfair question at all.
And Your Honor, most respectfully, we're going down this road. You narrowed the case to what it's about. These are their witnesses. We don't have a choice but to deal with what they're presenting as part of their theory of prosecution, which we have asked to be limited on multiple occasions.
You know, we're not objecting to them going in this area. The court made its own observation. We're not objecting. The only objection I had is they should not be pointing out an inference that somehow I was unethical. If they want to cross-examine, which they've already done regarding Kathy's alleged issues in medical school, have at it. It's a dead end into a crashing wall, but that's fine.
Your Honor, I want it to be clear. I don't think Mr. Lewin was being unethical. I just don't think he was familiar with the experience of every defense lawyer in this courtroom that has never seen a prosecutor talk to a witness during cross-examination. And I was aware of the Supreme Court case that made it not even a Sixth Amendment violation to stop it. So I'm not accusing him of being unethical. I'm just stating what our experience, collective experience has been, and I did ask you to prevent it, and whatever happened after happened. But
We're ready to
it's not an
proceed now.
attack on him.
We're ready to
Okay,
get
good.
going.
All right, let's bring in Nima and Terri one last time. Nima, the lawyers seem to be just as much a part of this case as the evidence is. Is that a good or a bad thing here?
Brian, it's not a good thing. And the reason is John Lewin, fantastic cold case prosecutor here in LA County, but he's been living with this case for so many years. He personally interviewed Bob Durst when he was arrested by the FBI down there in New Orleans, something that you rarely see. And there's been so many allegations of ethical impropriety on both sides, with Dick Figuerin going after Lewin and vice versa, and the judge having to admonish the jury. But I think the issue is these folks, they've been living, breathing with this case for so many years, more than 5 years, probably almost 10 years, and it's just not something that you typically see. That's why they're so emotionally invested.
Yeah. Terri, I think I'm going to ask Dan Abrams to install a mic so I can just have it brought down here like I'm in a boxing match, because this is just another bout between prosecutor and defense. How do you think it played out for the back and forth between the two of them?
Brian, if it's possible, I think they are both losing, and they're losing the jury's attention. They're going back and forth, accusing each other, like Nima said, of unethical things, even though the attorney there just said, I'm not accusing anyone of being unethical. When you say that the prosecution is coaching a witness, that is unethical. And in fact, there could be a violation there or even worse. So I definitely think that unless the defense has some sort of proof, that he needs to not make those allegations.
Absolutely. Nima, Terri, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.